I've recently returned to Australia after completing a 4-year posting as First Secretary and Consul at the Australian High Commission in Bangladesh. And in consular work, it's very visible. We're helping people who are on the ground more often than not. The main thing to remember when you're traveling overseas, and it could be to a country that's very similar to Australia or to a country that's very different, is just to read up on what their customs are, what's culturally acceptable. And that includes reading the information on Smart Traveller, reading country information reports online, speaking to friends maybe or family who've travelled there before, because some countries do have very different rules from us, which includes, cohabitation if you're not married, same-sex relationships, the religious customs and how you dress is also something to note, because a lot of countries require people to dress quite modestly. There's many countries where females, it's polite to cover your head. And particularly when you're around religious sites, can't go in shorts, for example, or tank tops, which here it would probably be acceptable. Be respectful to the culture that you are visiting or that the country you're in. We do get a lot of people who potentially get in trouble for those kinds of things, and it's very unintentional, but it's just do your research. Get travel insurance also, because you don't know, accidents could happen. I think it's been said before, and Smart Traveller has said if you can't afford travel insurance, you can't afford to travel, because it's just really, really important. I think the toughest consular cases I've experienced are things to do with personal family relationships or dual nationals who find themselves in prisons overseas where the conditions are very, very different to Australia. So I think those are the hardest ones, where people, often through no fault of their own, just find themselves in a bit of difficulty and then need to come to us for help to kind of work in a foreign system. Australia allows dual nationals, which means that you can be a citizen of Australia and you can also have a second citizenship. So where people have that, 95% of the time, it's not an issue. They use the other passport, they travel to the country of their nationality, everything goes smoothly, they return to Australia. In a small proportion of cases where people do get in trouble overseas and they need the Australian government's assistance, consular access can be quite difficult, because if you enter a country on the passport of that country, that government will view you as a national of their own. If someone was to come to a High Commission or an embassy or a consulate overseas seeking our assistance, more often than not, they're quite stressed. They don't really know the process. They could be in a country where they don't speak the language, so they haven't even been able to lodge a police report if they've lost a passport or it's been stolen. So they come to us to explain the situation. Of course, we've got Australian staff. We've also got local staff. They may prefer, as many people do in times of stress or trauma, to speak in their first language. So we've got local staff at every single embassy who speak the local language. They'll explain the situation. We will then explain to them what the process is. It's not just a one-stop thing and then you don't see them again. So you do monitor them, you manage them with the ultimate aim of really getting them back on their feet so that they can return home to Australia. With the consular role overseas, of course, we help Australians who get in trouble, but also we help large events where Australians travel to other countries. So one of the most interesting things that I dealt with over the 4 years was when the Australian men's T20 cricket team visited Bangladesh. This was at the tail end of the initial COVID pandemic where people were vaccinated, but obviously there were concerns about potential Australian team contracting COVID, etc. So we, as in myself and the team, worked with the Bangladesh government, the Bangladesh Cricket Board and Cricket Australia to create biosecurity bubbles where, new balls were played each time someone touched the ball. So that was a really interesting case or interesting event to work with. In a very different way, we managed that team, and also me and the team were inside the biosecurity bubble with the Australian team just to make sure we could provide support, just because there was such a fear of the Australian team potentially contracting COVID or something happening, and we just wanted to make sure that everything went quite smoothly. It was a massive amount of work, but it worked really well because there was really goodwill on both sides, particularly the Bangladeshi side, to make this a success because it meant so much, because they had a lot of these events cancelled. So all of that was just a great experience and part of the role of, what we get to do overseas.